I'm Eamon.
And I'm Merlin.
And we're Gay.
And His Enby.
And it's our first podcast. Woohoo! It's finally here. The wait is finally over.
Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey,
Eamon, you mind doing a rundown on kind of what we're doing here?
Yeah, so we got together at a certain point. I actually had the idea in my mind to do a podcast. It was literally ruminating. And I was like, oh, Merlin's not going to be for this. And then literally the day where it was like the biggest like thing in my brain, you came up to me and was like, hey, what if we do a podcast?
Yeah, I didn't even know you had actually thought about that beforehand. That's kind of
it's a great turn of events how that all turned out. But we are doing a podcast about everything that we love, just in terms of, I would say, media, pop culture, everything that's gay adjacent. Basically, all the conversations that we have in our living room, we are putting in front of a microphone and giving to all of you in the hopes that you will enjoy it.
I mean, I certainly enjoy it, but we're an audience of.
But you know, people can be very critical. But we'll see. We'll see how this goes. But I'm excited to sort of like take these conversations that we get into and sort of translate them into this environment and sort of have this platform to do this. So thank you all for listening to us. I know we've been teasing this for a little while now. If you follow us on our social medias, everywhere at Gay His Enby. We're just really excited to be here and really excited to be finally putting on this episode after all this time.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about pretty much this whole last season of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, because that season ended this week. We haven't gotten the reunion yet. That's in the next couple weeks, but we'll definitely be talking about the whole season leading up to that. Including the Jen Shaw of it all.
Of course. The thing that's on everyone's mind, the scandal of the century.
Right. We're also going to be talking about Real Housewives of Potomac. The season so far, this is season 7 of that show. So up until the current episode. And then, of course, next week we'll be doing episode by episode. We also will be covering the viral meme sensation that is Megan. That movie has a grip on my soul.
What a great way to start off the podcast in terms of a gay cultural moment.
Oh, but see, we're not even starting the show with that. We're going to start with the other phenomenal thing in gay culture, which is RuPaul's Drag Race.
Because there is not enough podcasts and not enough people talking about Drag Race. It's such a unique thing that we can talk about. But no, we're going to get into season 15 that just premiered this past Friday.
And if you've been paying attention on our social media, you have already seen our toot and boots of both the entrance looks of all 16 queens and the looks from the main stage from this episode as well. We will be doing all of our tooting and booting separately from this podcast so that we can really spend our time diving into more of the drama and whatnot that's going on.
And it does seem like it's going to be a pretty dramatic season. I mean, I think there was, at least in terms of what we were seeing from like the press events and the hype of everything, is that these girls aren't playing around. And we saw it a little bit in the beginning of this episode. I'm sure it'll get even spicier in the 5 months or however long it takes for the season to end, because if it's anything like last season.
Well, and that's what's crazy too. It's 16 queens, right?
The most that they've ever had, which
I honestly, if they're eliminating someone every episode, I don't mind 16 queens.
And that's a big if.
That is a big if. But I also feel like, the bigger that I guess let's just get into it.
Yeah, let's
Drag Race, right? So the bigger that the show gets, the more episodes the company or the networks want to get out of them, the more they want to pull from them for ads and all of that stuff. So
and now that they've moved on to MTV, which I know really stuck in your crawl that we're on a completely different network now.
It's so irritating because it's not available to stream anywhere. You have to have cable. And it's on every cable subscription. You can't get away from MTV when it comes to cable, but it's not on any streaming service. And all these people who have gone and gotten the different streaming services throughout the years to list or to watch Drag Race are sitting here with like 4 different subscriptions that they don't use anymore
Sure.
that they got to watch Drag Race, and now they can't use them.
And also, I mean, if the news is of what's being reported as well, that they are cutting down from an hour and a half to an hour in order to make basically a whole night of gay content with that whole Real Friends of WeHo, which I'm sorry, no one's watching.
Nobody's watching the Real Twinks of WeHo. Like I
It's
just
it's so frustrating because Brad Goreski, I saw him in the promo leading up to it. I was like, oh, maybe I'll be, and then once you see Todrick, it's just like, no, we're not playing this game.
why are we
I
giving
don't
him
know.
a platform?
Well, it's also like if I knew also the other half of them, then maybe. But and also if it's going to cut into Drag Race, but I hope they don't go back to where it used to be, where they would cut down on the runways and like shorten them to like fit into an hour time slot.
Especially once we get to like the ball challenge.
Oh, God.
And they're gonna edit down Snatch Game to be, because I already looked. Snatch Game is like episode 3 or 4 this season.
Really?
It's a huge, huge episode. How are they going to fit all of that in if they're only doing an hour episode to fit in the Real Twinks of WeHo?
It's a big mistake. But anyways, let's get into sort of our first impressions. It was a double episode technically. And they have been doing lately these sort of like split premieres in terms of splitting the cast and get, which I do enjoy because it gives you more time to sort of get to know people.
But they didn't really do it the same way this time. They did split entrances, but the whole cast was together pretty much the whole episode.
Right. I think also I think there was a lot of people really satisfied that we've got an elimination the first episode because the worries of everything that happened last season.
Technically, though, it was still the second episode when we got our first elimination.
Sure.
We haven't had a first episode elimination since like season 8.
It's anyways, let's get into these queens and get into, because I think there's a lot of really great characters this season. I really, obviously, Sasha Colby, being the drag legend that she is, coming in and really just kind of like, it's always great seeing someone come in where everyone just recognizes, oh, this person's amazing from the giddy up. There were a lot of good people, like just shady queens. Like I think Irene was very shady. Lux, we got into this whole discussion, this whole episode about whether or not Lux's hair was 40 inches.
It was not. It was 33 at the most.
But I do think that I will say credit to Diabetti from last season of. I really do hope that she ushered in this ability for these queens to finally just sort of be their themselves and not have to worry about the pressures of like being the villain of the show, because I think we had, I would say at least like 4 or 5 this first couple episodes where they're clearly willing to be bitches without the fear that they're going to get death threats and that they're going to, have to be, it's such a mess. To me, that's why Drag Race in the first place was such a great reality show concept, in the fact that drag queens are naturally great reality stars because they are so shady, and I think that's incredibly important to the success of the franchise.
Yeah, and it all started changing, honestly, for me, season 4, or not really season 4, but like after season 4, when Fifi really got attacked for everything that happened that season. And everybody's been terrified to be the villain since then, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. I like you, I'm hoping that this season changes that. So who stood out for you in the Maxi Challenge this week?
Oh, were we talking to the talent show, or are we talking the mini challenge photo shoot?
You know what? Let's do let's go ahead and do the mini challenge.
Because I was going to say they split the premiere, but they gave each of the splits basically 2 old photo shoot challenges from past seasons. The basically get sprayed with a bunch of water in front of a car, and then also get blown with wind and
a bunch
debris,
of debris.
And this is always a great, I think, classic Drag Race challenge of just immediately throwing them into some situation that's really treacherous.
And we cannot get through the mini challenge without talking about the fact that Spice
Oh my God.
took her wig off and put on a shower cap.
Do you also think because there's a lot of discussion of like what they get informed of before the show. Did she think she was doing the water one, and like she was like,
mean-
"Well, I got the shower cap anyways. I might as well do." But Rue looked like she wanted to kill her.
Look, if the
And-
queens are not ready to go through hell in that first photo shoot, then they have never seen the show before and they don't need to be there.
Sure. Speaking of that, so the other big twist of the season, and I guess the big selling point going into this season is the reason that we have 16 queens. I would say is in part because we have a pair of twins competing for the first time.
Right, and they are competing separately, but I'm worried.
Thoughts?
Look,
Your initial thoughts on
when
Sugar and
every
Spice?
look that we have had, including their runway look from this episode, when every look is derivative of each other,
Right.
not necessarily mirrored, right, but they're definitely takes on a theme and they're both pulling from the same location. It's worrisome.
And when we get into more in-depth runways and in-depth challenges where the theme is going to be much more specific, I just don't know how they're going to, because I'm sure they're getting the same designers. I'm sure they're getting, everything working together. I can only imagine.
And I know I mentioned this to you before, but I really hope that they didn't get the same designer. I really hope that they took their list of required outfits and went different directions with them. And the only thing that's similar is this first episode and the promo stuff. I really hope that they were setting their brand as twins in this first episode.
Because they definitely have a brand.
Yes, they do. And
We'll get to that.
Look, they're huge on TikTok for what they do. And we will get to the social media of it all with Queens. Because I think that's a good discussion to have. But social media queens get a bad rap.
I think it's also one of them is going to naturally have to differentiate themselves because they're both not going to be able to win the competition. It's, I think a lot of people are making the cross reference to America's Next Top Model when they had a season with twins on. And unless one of them is able to like definitively differentiate themselves from the other, that's the only way that they're going to be successful at the end of the day. And when your brand is so much built on you look the same, you act the same, you lip sync the same. Like, I don't know how you do that.
And these shady producers are just waiting for an excuse to put them in the bottom two so we can have them lip sync and send one of them home.
I mean, that's literally...
That's the whole point of booking the twins.
If there's one thing about Drag Race and how they produce their shows, subtlety is not one of the key components.
Drag queens don't do subtle anyway.
Sure. But I think also, they were a lot these first two episodes. I was getting very much Laganja vibes from both of them. I think even Selena called out on their entrance about the sort of rehearsal of it all and how they kind of they don't feel lived, I guess, so to speak. I think that's partly, I think they attributed that to their being social media queens or TikTok queens. I think it's much more in the sense that they're twins. They're very stereotypical twins. They're the twins that have only been friends with each other their whole lives, and so they don't really have that sort of like social interaction with other people.
But I will say that I was going to save this for when we were talking about Untucked, but there's there's this argument that social media queens are not as good or as well versed as queens who have spent their lives in the clubs, right? In the typical drag scene. But with the pandemic, every queen, in order to stay relevant, had to become a social media queen, and they had to be well versed in something that they had never gotten into before. And some of these queens didn't start like Sugar and Spice. Some of these queens didn't start drag until during the pandemic, and they didn't have another option.
I think that's part of it. I also think I think Lux Noir London made a really good point on the episode about like a lot of them are also very young and they started drag at a time in which they can go into clubs because of their age. So getting that sort of foreground to sort of start in this field, I think as long as you're focusing on every aspect of, your drag, I think it's perfectly valid and fine. But I also understand where it's like someone like Malaysia Baby Doll Fox is coming from as somebody who, and she has talked about how she also is, a makeup artist to celebrities and she's gotten into certain fields. I'm sure as a gay person, especially, it's much harder. You have to work 10 times harder when you don't have that sort of front facing look on you, when a network can't, look at your uh, Twitter following or your TikTok following and say, well, that person has something, let's bring them on. I,
Right.
I think it's valid in multiple ways. I also got to say that they are playing really fast and loose with the term viral. I feel on this show. At one point, Princess Poppy says that she is most known for being viral for her TikTok video where she had her dress that said "I'm homophobic." I'm like, that went. I don't know what that is.
I didn't see it.
There, like, is what is viral can be like a couple thousand. There has to be like a metric, guys. Like,
Right.
Anyways, but
Main challenge. Let's move on to
yes.
Maxi Challenge. Who stood out to you there?
So this was the talent show, and this was all 16 queens in this talent show, which I was very worried about at the start. And I will say also, we'll get into that in a little bit. I think clearly, the top talent of the night was Anitra's.
Oh, clearly.
I think, that video has been going viral for days now, of her performance from the show, and it is just so high energy, so entertaining. And I think they made a good point later in the episode of the queens that were successful in this challenge, where I don't think they're calling it a talent show anymore. I think they're just calling it a variety show, I guess, because most queens now are just bringing on an original song and lip syncing.
But where's the variety?
Sure.
14 out of the 16 queens did lip syncs.
Yes, but I think the queens that did well were ones that mixed some element of traditional actual talent, like Jax with her gymnastics, Marsha with her ballet background, like having certain elements woven in there to where it's something different than just you performing a song, because there's really only so much you can do with that.
Right. Clearly there were also negative standouts. Oh, poor Irene.
I felt so bad.
Because you could tell that was part of a larger bit and it just wasn't landing.
Yeah, she I think explained on the pit stop of like, this is a bit that I do in clubs, but I had to like truncate it for like a minute.
Oh yeah, because they only get a minute, right?
Yeah.
For the talent show, especially with 16 queens, they got to get through it.
I was at first like, okay, what is this? Once she started like fiddling with the ice cubes with her nails because she couldn't pick them up, I was like, okay, I get what she's trying to do. And then it just didn't. It needs to be more prolonged to sort of make more of a joke out of it.
Right. And there's just not time to do a prolonged gag like that.
No, that was the only frustrating thing. We met also to some of the better ones as well. I also want to give credit to Jax jumping rope with her hair, which was phenomenal.
Absolutely stunning.
I think I've heard great things about Jax, and she was one of the few that I had heard of going into this season. And she's known for a lot of her lip syncs and a lot of her acrobatics and stuff like that. She was very quiet most of the episode. We didn't really get a lot of like confessionals and like any sort of dialogue necessarily with her, but it was good to see even with that someone perform very well and sort of like really nail it.
I wasn't expecting Marsha to pull out a ballet inspired interpretive dance like thing.
Yeah.
That was really good and unexpected.
And I thought there was also a lot of discussion of like who was going to be the next Willow Pill after last season and her performance. I guess Marsha's was the closest to that, but it wasn't as insane.
I mean, they're different queens. I understand we are comparing queens because we have to compare it to something we understand. That's human nature, like obviously, but I also think that trying to find the next Willow Pill, quote unquote, is kind of toxic.
Yeah.
But that's the community.
Sure. If there's one thing about the gay community, we are toxic. What did you think of Sugar and Spice's performance? I had thoughts.
I thought Spice's was good, and at least it had the goth edge to it. But I don't know if you noticed, it was the same track.
That's what it literally, like,
It was the
both of
same
their,
track, same rhyme scheme. They literally went to the same school of making generalization drag rap and did that.
and like same I feel like, and I'm glad that you pointed it out too, because I felt like this whole week when I was watching like everyone's thoughts on the episode, like I felt like I was the only one that wasn't feeling sugar and spice this. Everyone online is just like, oh, they really defied the expectations. Everyone can, it wasn't bad. It was catchy. Everything was catchy. Everything was good, but I just didn't feel like they had necessarily a stage presence that allowed Rue to sort of crack up for as much as she did for the performance. And I was just shocked that they didn't get called out for having incredibly similar performances.
Yeah. I give them like what, 5, maybe 6 episodes before they put those two in the bottom together,
It's got to happen sooner
because they're
rather than
kind
later.
of middle of the pack right now. So some of the lower cards will have to get weeded out before they really get down there.
Yeah. So in the tops for the episode, we had Marsha, Anitra, and Jax. And then in the bottoms, Irene, as you mentioned before. We had Amethyst, again, similar to Irene's, that I think didn't really flesh out the bit as much as she could. And then Lucy LaDuca, who I think they were right to say she has the talents to sing live. I think it was just a bad choice in terms of
adding the live singing to the mediocre dancing was a bad call. It should have been cut the dancing and up the vocals, or just do a lip sync, because what she did was neither well.
Yeah. I wanted to make also a note about some of the judging. There was one thing that I was really annoyed by, and you and I have had these discussions. The critiques on Marsha's makeup were really annoying to
I've
me.
seen this all over the internet too, and the entire world is frustrated with that judging. So basically,
okay.
The judges read Marsha for using too little makeup. Well, you got her on the show because of that makeup. That's why you cast her. So why are you out of the gate reading her for what she does?
I just feel like a lot of the I hated. It's also, I hated the critiques of Bosco last season in terms of her silhouette and stuff like that.
1000%.
I think they really don't understand that part of sometimes with drag is you have your shtick and you have and yes, you need to diversify and all that stuff, but sometimes you have your go-tos and what makes you unique as a performer. It was just very similar to the Courtney Act critique of like, well, we know you're very pretty, but I don't understand why a cut crease is needed for somebody to be a drag queen.
Also, a cut crease on Marsha Brady lookalike?
Right.
Really? Her shtick is Marsha Brady.
As much as I do agree that Marsha, this episode, needed to diversify her looks because they were very similar throughout the episode. I just feel like if you're not the idea that if you're not doing a big eye and giant cut crease, that you're not doing drag, or that you need to do that. Why does she need to look crazy when she has all of these qualities? It's like when you're critiquing someone with a silhouette of someone who has really good legs, they should show off the legs. Why are we not praising them for knowing their body, knowing their assets, and using it to their advantage? I also, with the judging, was really just annoyed by Ross this whole episode.
I mean, I'm always annoyed by Ross. Let's be real. Why is he still on this panel?
You were trying to give H2O, but it was H2O. I was like, I almost turned the TV off. I was done. I was so done.
RuPaul sounds more genuine next to him. He sounds so canned.
Put him on the True Friends of whatever. What did you call it? True Drinks of We Know?
Yeah.
So we, Anitra wins. Congratulations to her. Very well deserved.
Bottom 2 is Irene and Amethyst, and they lip sync to 7 Rings by Ariana Grande.
I thought it was a good lip sync.
I thought it was fine for episode 1. Irene was doing some weird stuff with her lips.
It was very pronounced. I think this was definitely a lip sync where it's like if they edited it a different way, they could have gotten a different result necessarily, because I think it was pretty even.
Sure. And I really liked Eileen. I mean, not spoiler alert, but she gets eliminated.
You liked Irene too.
Yeah.
You said Eileen.
Oh, did I say Eileen? I liked Irene. Sorry. There's 80 million queens on this show.
And much of them with 3 or 4 names. So
I really liked Irene on the show, but as far as the challenge and the lip sync is concerned, she clearly lost, I felt, to Amethyst.
Yeah, I think it was the right decision. And they critiqued Amethyst's padding, which I think was fair. And I feel like that's also a thing that can be fixed throughout the competition. And, you can still improve on things as opposed to like when they had Vanjie on season 11, we're just like, hey, you brought the same silhouette for every outfit. Well, can't fix that.
Yeah, like there's nothing I could do. Well, then send me home and I'll see you on All Stars, I guess. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So Irene goes home very sad. But congrats to Amethyst for saying. And honestly, I thought this was a really good episode. Really good first start. Like we said, I hope it doesn't go too crazy in terms of length. I hope they start eliminating some people.
Yeah.
But overall, not too bad. Do we want to move on to some Real Housewives discussions and topics?
We sure do, but first we are going to take a short break to hear a few words from our sponsor.
Well, hello, friends. I'm your pal in the mainstream media.
And I'm the Riz.
And, Riz, it takes years of strenuous, dedicated training before you're worthy to step inside a professional wrestling ring. But it takes even more time to develop complex, highly astute opinions about professional wrestling. Am I right?
That is correct. And you know where we can find that?
Yes.
On the Wrestling Man.
That's right.
Sidekick Media Services. We are your sidekick in business for social media, video production, and more. Find out more at sidekickmediaservices.com.
All right, you guys, welcome back to Gay and His Enby. We are going to get into our Housewives section, starting with Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Pretty much all of season 3. We just had the finale this week, and
this season, my God.
I mean, it's been a weird one.
Salt Lake City is always a bit of a trip, but I think a lot of the discussion online has been very down on this season, which I kind of understand. The ratings have been not as great as they once were. I don't know what that's sort of attributed to, but
honestly, I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that everyone knew going into this season that Jen Shah pled guilty.
There wasn't much of a cliffhanger in terms of everything that happened. So
right, all the tension that has been built throughout season 1 and season 2. Season 1 was everybody questioning where she got her money, right?
Right.
Season 2 is the arrest of it all, right? And the case is she going to go to jail? Is she not? This season, everybody already knew.
It's a lot, and you mentioned it. Obviously, the big thing is Jen Shah, and just I think last week at some point was her final sentencing in her fraud case.
January 6th. It's an infamous day here
what a
in
day.
the U.S.
The premiere of Drag Race and Jen Shah's sentencing, a day that will live in infamy, January 6th. But no, so she has been sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for defrauding elderly people.
And honestly, if they had waited till the finale, she might have got the full 11.
You were saying this.
It was a drastic change. She is lucky that they didn't air all of season 3 a week earlier, because it would have been much harsher in my view.
Honestly, like, she takes no accountability in this finale. And I've been reading the transcripts from the sentencing and the text messages, by the way, that were pretty damning in terms of her knowledge of events.
And with Coach Shaw's involvement with everything that nobody out here knew about. I didn't know about it.
Yeah, it's
and
very...
then the fact that she took all of that money from her mother.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I got, like, there are times when we're watching these shows where I just have to sort of get up out of my chair and just walk around a little bit. That was definitely one of those moments where I was just like, she literally took out, like, her retirement, like, depleted her retirement, took out loans on her house under the belief that her daughter was innocent, and that her daughter kept telling her that she was going to fight this and she was innocent, telling her friends on the show and telling the cameras on the show up until the minute it seemed that she was not going to take a plea and was and being the last holdout. It's just like, come on. It was a lot. But so this whole season, Jen is kind of a mess. She's yelling I was going to say she's yelling, but that's kind of normal with Jen as we've seen throughout the show. And the big thing also, anything with Jen, what's happening to Jen, she's going to serve her time and all that. And it's, she's going to pay her penance. I think she has to pay like $9 million in restitution, which is crazy. And I mean, justified, but crazy. I think the only thing it really bleeds into this season is like Heather and Meredith and their sort of friendship with Jen, but particularly Heather. Part of me feels really bad for Heather this season because it's like, girl, you just have no self-esteem.
Yeah. But then she's using, she has gotten some self-esteem because then she goes off on Whitney.
Well, yes, but I think we'll get into the Heather and Whitney aspect of it, but just there's so much where it's you could tell Heather really lets people take advantage of her in terms of her friendship. We've seen it across the show with Jen. I don't know a lot of people who would call me Shrek or a manatee, and I would just continue to be friends with them even after all that's been going on. But I think that makes sense as to why she would lash out on someone like Whitney in terms of it's the biggest reactions are for the people who, as much as I've had my issues with Whitney this season, she's part of it is also because she's afraid of Jen. I think in many ways. I think while not the culpability is different, it's very similar to what's happened at Beverly Hills with Erica and sort of the intimidation that she brings to certain people in their ability to call her out on things. I mean, Jen, it's almost worse because she just threatens to kill you and fight you all the time, which is more than once occurrence on this show. But it just, and also Heather talks all the time about being this ride or die friend. And it's okay, but then you're saying one thing in one sequence and then another thing in another. She'll not bash Jen, but rightfully take it to Jen in terms of how Jen treats her. And then once Dana is let's call this out, it's no, let's be quiet. It's there's no real backbone.
Also, let's just put it out there. I am really sure that Jen is the one that hit her, Heather.
Oh, duh.
That black eye came from Jen, and Heather is protecting her.
I think that's the only logical conclusion other than this is some made up
And she was afraid of making the thing. Honestly, I don't understand why she hasn't said something now that Jen has pled guilty. And we see at the very end of the finale here how Heather's view of Jen has drastically taken a 180
but
in the days following her plea. But then also in the press, Heather has still been her ride or die this whole time.
Heather was still partying with her at BravoCon. That's where I get really frustrated. I've been a Heather fan most of this franchise, and I think a lot of people have. But there's just something about this tail end of this season where a lot of the sort of insecurities, but also just the backhandedness. You talked about the black eye and how that ate up 3 episodes this season.
But I don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it constantly.
But I don't know who did it, but I definitely know who did it. I'm going to imply that somebody did it.
And spiders laid eggs in my eye.
But also I don't want to talk about it. Everything about that was just frustrating to no end. And I think it's also the issue with Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City feels like a parody in many ways of Housewives. So you can just see the wheels turning all the time. And I think that's the other thing when it comes to you were mentioning the Heather and Whitney stuff. Obviously, these were two people who were close friends through most of the season, cousins. Obviously, in Salt Lake, the whole Mormonism of it all is too in depth and sticky to get into.
Look, I was raised a Protestant, and I'm a pagan now, so I'm not going anywhere near Mormonism. Nope. I don't know much about it other than what I've seen from Salt Lake, honestly. So,
but the frustration in terms of their sort of broken friendship and the shifting of it, I was very Team Heather the first half of this season in regards to this, and Whitney, while I credit her for trying to, overcome this trauma that she's rediscovering, which we don't really know in detail. Hopefully we'll get more detail at the reunion. But just the way she tries to I just did not understand her trying to like, oh, my trauma is why I stir up mess on this show and why I, go, try to tell the world that Lisa gave blowjobs for jazz tickets. Like, it didn't make any sense at all. And Heather was getting pulled into it in a way that I do agree. It was like, leave me out of this. What do I have to do with this? You're drunk. You literally need to go to bed right now. And so for that part, I blamed Whitney. But now, like, this, like, second, ever since the black eye part of it, I'm just like, Heather, what is up with you?
Like, neither of them are pristine in this fight, but neither of them are 100% the bad guy. They have both done wrong in this relationship, and I honestly feel like they just kind of need to go, okay, the past is the past. Let's start over today.
Sure.
And just be done, because...
And we got a whole Ultimate Girls Trip still to come where they're still...
oh my God, I forgot they were on Ultimate Girls Trip together. Jeez.
Yeah, and so it's still going to go on. I think... But they also, that's my frustration with Salt Lake, and I think people's frustration with this season is that they also talk in this like code language. They don't.
Are you talking about the fact that nobody can say the E vowel correctly or E vowel?
There's
correctly?
that, but that's
I'm talking about my feelings.
That's back into Mormonism and back into the whole Salt Lake of it all. But no, like I wish they were just blunt with each other. Both Heather and Whitney love to talk in these like metaphors that it's just like, just talk like a human being. Like, and also the metaphors seem to always be around the fact that like their friendship was based on the fact that they kept targeting Lisa for the last 2 seasons. And that's more than anything where it's like, I'm a bit of a Lisa Barlow stan and a Lisa Barlow apologist.
And honestly, after this season, I am too.
I think there's a lot of valid points that Lisa's making in terms of like the fact that Heather is so mad that Whitney is now friends with Lisa, even though Heather has made attempts to be friends with Lisa this season, while also it's a lot. But the structure of Housewives a lot of the time, there are alliances and there are, workings in the back. We see that a lot with Beverly Hills this past season. But we as the viewer shouldn't see the wheels turning. This should be something that's a lot more coy and a lot more, done smartly. And I just feel like with Salt Lake, everything is so calculated.
Oh, yeah.
And it's why I think it's a turning off.
But I think that a lot, I mean, not specifically due to Mormonism, but, just anybody who feels like they have to keep up appearances.
Sure.
That is the way that they operate, whether that is because of religion or because of social status or whatever. When you are in an environment where everything is based on appearances, everything is calculated, everything is planned out in the back of your head. And I think in a place like Salt Lake City and Utah, really in general, where the religion and the social status are intertwined so inextricably,
right?
Like it's impossible to navigate those waters, especially when, like both Whitney and Heather, they've both left the Mormon church at this point. So they're both kind of fallen out with a lot of society, and they're trying to scramble and get back to a place of needing validation.
And they both have a lot of self-esteem issues. We talked about Heather's earlier, but I would say Whitney has probably the same. There was a lot of talk this season of like, I don't want to be the pawn anymore, and I don't want to do everyone's bidding, even though her doing of people's bidding is really just of her own making. Lisa Barlow can't force you to like blame Meredith for Jen going to prison. Like it's, but they both have insecurities and trauma. God, that word.
Oh, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Let's not get into it. Let's not get into it.
Trauma.
To where I think they are very self-conscious of themselves, and then project that onto each other, and also project that onto Lisa Barlow. And as Lisa Barlow would say, I'm a very good person. Lisa Barlow is an amazing person.
So let's get into the Lisa and Meredith of it all. We've touched on Lisa.
Is it bad that I'm more over this part than the Heather and Whitney stuff? I feel like the
Honestly,
the general like dialogue is very over this whole like Heather Whitney saga. To me, it's this Lisa Meredith stuff, and I am fully team Lisa, and I think Meredith is just being ridiculous at this point.
1000%. Like, clearly, honestly, it all leads back to the stupid, like, hot mic moment at the end of last season, where Lisa
She
was
calls her a
screaming
garbage
in
whore.
Garbage whore, slept with half of New York City, yada, 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 all of that stuff, which clearly was wrong, right? Obviously. But number one, she was venting in what she thought was a private moment, didn't realize that she was still mic'd. She specifically went into a room and shut the door, so she didn't realize she was still being filmed.
And Meredith makes the point of like, oh, well, if you look, there's a producer when you look into the mirror. It's like, you know what? But you have cameras everywhere. You're on a reality show. There are producers everywhere. Why does that make it
Also, usually when you're speaking directly to the producer, that doesn't go to air.
right? I've said this to you before, and just my thing of just like, was the Lisa Barlow hot mic moment a shocking moment? 100%.
Gag worthy, fabulous, loved it.
But in the however many, the over a decade long history of the Real Housewives, is this really the worst thing that has been said on this
Absolutely not.
program? Like, we are acting as though this was like irreparable damage that Lisa Barlow, like we're acting as if like she punched Brooks in the face.
To be fair, we're not. Nobody believes that but Meredith.
Well, and then Meredith, as much as, and here's the thing, I actually liked Meredith the first half of this season in sort of bringing it back to Lisa of like, oh, well, if you're going to do this, I'm going to fire back a little bit and talk about how, there are rumors going around that you're doing sexual favors for Vita Tequila sales. That's,
And
that's
the fact
Housewives.
that she sat there and manipulated Whitney into saying things when she was the
I wouldn't go that far. That's a whole discussion.
Absolutely not. She was. I completely am on Whitney's side on that. In that Meredith says things in a way to goad things out of you. She will drop a hint and speak around something and wait for you to actually name it. And then when it comes back to that thing being named and who put it out there, then she blames it on you.
Well, I think more than anything is that in the words of our dearly departed Lisa Rinna, she doesn't own
Dearly?
She doesn't own anything though. If she would just have this season own the fact that she was fighting fire with fire and going to say rumors about Lisa in the same way she felt that Lisa was saying it about her, fine. I would have honestly supported that. It's Housewives. That's what happens. But the fact that she does this and then makes it seem like she wasn't doing it and that it was on a completely different level than what Lisa did, even though Lisa did it in a private room and she's doing it directly in front of cameras. Like, there's a double standard. And I think at the Goddess party like a couple episodes ago, I think Lisa called it out really perfectly. And that's where I'm just like, at this point, you either need to own what you're doing and embrace it. And I'm sure if she did, people would really get behind her. Like, there were people cheering her on when she had that I Heart New York hat to make fun of the comments. But like, either own it or, it's frustrating because you could be a big star. And Meredith has this tendency across this franchise to just sort of like, classically disengage and classically prolong something to a degree in which it just doesn't become fun anymore.
Yeah. Speaking of people that manipulate events to their own ends, let's move on to Real Housewives of Potomac and this bullshit with Candace v.
Green
Giselle
Idea
and Robin is kind of
you're right,
only halfway culpable at this point.
Yeah, so this season Potomac's been really great. And I think Potomac has been, for the last couple of years, I think a top tier franchise. I mean, this is you look back at season 1, I don't think they really thought much of Potomac in terms of what they could be for the network, but I think Potomac's really bringing in what needs to be brought in. And I got to what you were saying. I'm fully Team Candace this season, and that is shocking for me to say.
I've always been Team Candace for the record. Write that down.
I have liked Candace. I think there's a lot of elements of Candace that I really liked, and there were just elements that were really frustrating me in terms of some of her behavior. And I've said this before about how I tend to honestly agree with her on many issues in regards to stuff that happens on the show, but she then takes it to such a level to where you can't really support her after that. It's like, yes, you are correct that Ashley is messy and that her husband's a creep, but you don't need to say that she has a wide body after she's given birth. Because then you can't defend her after that. But Candace
Thanks to making fun of her forehead.
Yes. Candace has gotten better at that this season. Like, she's really like disengaged when she knows she's going to take things to a more like, a level that she can't come back from. And has been amazing in the confessionals this season. Like, she is just giving like line after line. She's honestly at times beating Karen in terms of the confessionals, and that's crazy to say because I love Karen's confessionals.
Yeah, I mean, just the not today neck, not today. We
don't have it.
I love that woman.
But as you were mentioning, the stuff with Candace and particularly Giselle. So we kind of knew this going into the season because there was stuff going on Twitter and in the blogs and stuff like that of what was transpiring.
Oh no, the blogs.
But honestly, I good on Candace. I think if anything, like Candace and Chris getting ahead of this sort of helped define the narrative on it properly. So at a certain point during the season, Ashley, who is we'll talk later, is just recently divorced. Talks to Robin about how she got this DM from Chris on Instagram about meeting him at the W, which is a hotel that he is the general manager of.
At like 2 a.m.
And also, I'm glad that Robin also like clarifying that like it's not a DM. He responded to a story on Instagram.
Also, this is the restaurant that he manages, and he was getting off of work at that time. That's why he responded in the middle of the night.
And responded to a story of Ashley partying with some of her friends and being like, hey, basically saying, you should have come to the W because I would have let you in for free.
Right, because obviously, like, coming to the W, especially when you're one of the housewives, that's bringing notoriety to his restaurant that him alone being there does not do, and that's good for business.
So Robin, of course, after having this conversation with Ashley, brings it up to Giselle, her best friend. And then Giselle then suddenly starts to bring up this story about the last year's reunion and how Chris was really upset after the stuff with Nicki Minaj and Candace happened at the reunion, and he was frustrated. And whether either he or asked to talk to Giselle or vice versa, we're not sure. But they eventually go into Giselle's hotel room. Now, to clarify, I think to say like, oh, we went to their hotel room.
That's their staging area.
When they do the reunions, usually it's in a ballroom of some hotel. And when they have their makeup artists come in to do their makeup and whatever, they basically just rent out a bunch of rooms in the hotel and do them in there. And so it's, yes, technically a hotel room, but it is being used for their makeup. And
like nobody's staying there overnight.
By her account, like basically in everything that Giselle describes, Chris has a conversation with her where he's just, she says he's like frustrated with his wife or something, whatever, but that he doesn't make any like actual implicit pass on her. But that just the generalness of that she felt uncomfortable by it because she thought her makeup team was going to be in there and they weren't. And like, there's also a lot disputing facts in terms of like the actual details. Chris is saying certain other things, but it's also just meant to sort of imply that Chris is doing something nefarious.
Right.
And it is so incredibly frustrating. And Giselle does this all the time. And you've been more of a Giselle fan in the past. And
I like her because she's shady and she's fun, but I feel like on this moment she has gone way too far, and it's gone from being a fun level of shady to a level of shady that can ruin someone's life if you're not careful.
Sure. And I think that, and I agree that I find Giselle fun in many cases, but I think the overarching narrative, and it's something that Karen's talked about on multiple occasions, is that Giselle likes to get in people's marriages. And I think, honestly, she's proving that point correct. I think the stuff that happened with Wendy last season is very much validated in terms of what she's doing with Candace. But basically, she then tries to bring keep in mind, this is also months after this happened, by the way. Giselle's been sitting on this to bring this out onto camera. They eventually, she confronts her on camera. And also, the thing that always frustrated me with it is that partly she's implying to certain people that, oh, Chris, didn't know what he was doing, but he should still apologize because he just didn't think about the optics of it or whatever. And then in other conversations, she's implying, well, I've been around a lot of men who have tried to get it in the past.
He's a sneaky link.
He called him a sneaky link. And those are two very different things. And
well, I mean, like it always is with Giselle, it's however it needs to be interpreted to fit her current narration of the events.
Sure. But Candace had that amazing fourth wall breaking moment where she just looks straight into the camera and is like, what is this?
We're not doing this.
And she was so smart for this.
And you better air all of this on the show.
Yeah, she's like, I know this game. I know what's been happening. I'm not going to play into this, and I'm going to make a point to show the world that this is a structural thing. And it continues when you also get Ashley involved, who Ashley has been trying to, be more friendly with Candace in the past, or in the recent past of this season, but then starts bringing up her friend who said that Chris was hitting on her at an event, which has been completely refuted by everything at that event. Like
literally the same cameras, by the way, that caught her ex-husband, Gropey McGroperson.
Yes.
On camera, who, disgusting man. I'm so glad he's not on the show anymore. But those same cameras have vindicated Chris. They have shown that he was not doing what her friend was saying that he was doing. What is Candace calling her?
Oh,
Sesame Street.
The Sesame Street
God.
character.
I love her reads this year.
As much as Candace is one to go after someone's looks, but I don't think it's wrong for her, and then also Mia validated as well. It's like, let's not say that.
Also, there have been some great side by sides with her and some Sesame Street characters, and I'm not saying they're related. I'm just saying you might check that ancestry.
But to that point, what if the cameras weren't there? What if the cameras didn't pick up on what wasn't able to expose the lies? Then we would have had a whole season speculating on whether Chris did this or not. And that's the frustrating element of it, is playing into that sort of ambiguity of it all. Because in this case, at least there were cameras. But with Giselle's case, there's nothing to validate what happened. There's no third party or no anything to get the definitive story.
But good on production for fact checking this stuff in the moment on the screen.
Yeah.
They literally, as what's her face Sesame Street is telling these outright lies and mischaracterizations of events, they're literally playing back the footage in the same moment, and with the lower third saying not what happened, absolutely did not happen.
And then trying to loop Eddie into it as well, Wendy's husband. Come on, this is getting ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous.
But also, the fact that it is, it's one thing when Giselle does it, but then when you bring Ashley in, it's like, okay, this feels coordinated. And speaking of what also I think is a little bit of coordination, the other big thing from this season is Karen and Charisse.
Ooh, Charisse has returned, y'all.
It's been something. Charisse from season 1, coming back as a friend of this season, being brought in seemingly by Robin. And literally, Robin is so messy for this. I'm sorry. Setting up this whole idea of well, who's the real Grand Dame of Potomac? It's Karen.
It's Karen.
Can we stop with this?
Charisse ain't been here for 6 seasons. Shut up.
And credit to Karen. Karen has made I think this last episode she kind of broke a little bit, but Karen has been giving her nothing this whole season, and it's making Giselle and Robin so angry that that
But
Karen is not
honestly,
giving her
I
anything.
don't blame Karen for going off. Like I don't. Was it in this last episode, or is it
Yes.
in the previews for the next episode?
No,
She
it-
completely goes off on Charisse, and I don't blame her because she has been putting up with it and just putting up with it and staying quiet and just venting a little bit in confessionals, and that's been it. But you push a woman so far, and all of a sudden, Dane goes to damn.
In the words of Karen, I don't fuck with that woman 'cause I don't fuck with that woman. So good. But no, so they've had issues for I think 5 years because of the stuff that Charisse brought to that run reunion about her Karen making out with Blue Eyes and getting with Ray or getting sleeping out away from Ray. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But at this point, like, do we care?
No.
Do we honestly care? Like, Karen and Ray can do whatever the hell they want in their relationship. I'm fully in the belief that Ray just lets Karen do whatever she wants.
Honestly. And I mean, they've even talked about it, at least to a certain extent, that she's allowed to have arm candy and certain things at events and whatnot. You know, because Ray doesn't want to go all of that.
Does Ray care? Like, does Ray, Katie Ross can grab his butt this season and all this. Like, they have a fun relationship that works for them. Who cares at the end of the day?
Honestly, when are we going to stop judging people's marriages and just let them be who they are? Like, honestly, stay out of people's marriages.
You realize this is the Real Housewives we're talking about, right?
Oh, right. You're right.
We
Never
kind of have
mind.
to be in it. But no, like, Charisse has just been trying for a fight with Karen this whole season. Like, God forbid Karen didn't invite her to her one-woman show.
Ugh.
And,
I wouldn't want her there either, considering how the other people that were actually on the cast treated her at that show, which, by all accounts, for people that were actually there, that show went a lot better than what we were shown on screen.
They edited it to really shade Karen.
I mean,
Producers are on Karen a lot.
It couldn't have been that bad. Jasmine Masters is fabulous.
Sure.
So, like, I know she showed up and turned out. So, I'm not even...
But, as Karen's... The fact that Karen this past episode called her a has-been leprechaun looking for a pot of gold. But it's so clear that Charisse wants a storyline to get back on the show. And, I guess good for her, but I feel like she should be focusing on anything else other than that to try to... Because anything where it's not her trying to, like, mess with Karen is really boring at the end of the day.
Well, speaking of people who have non-traditional marriage things going on, let's talk about Mia and the huge blow up with Wendy and the huge blow up with Jacqueline, her friend of this season.
So this, and the fact that this started, going into this season on Twitter, that weird thing of Mia posting that video of Jacqueline, like, beating up her ex-husband or something like that.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Well, and that just before the season even started, and the fact that we see this whole saga of her friendship with Jacqueline, it's like, what is happening? I guess obviously the big thing I was gonna say the big thing was the fight with Wendy, but then we also had Cancergate in the beginning of the season.
Oh, jeez.
Which just like
Cancer, no cancer.
The boldness of Giselle. I get it that it's what people were thinking. Like, I agree with people being like, get off of Giselle. The dialogue online was whether or not Mia actually did have cancer because of the vagueness.
Yeah,
of the
but she
post.
was crass with it. You don't
go up to a
you don't
person
go
at
up-
an event and say, "Hey, is this cancer? No cancer?"
Especially with something as serious as cancer. Like, you go, "Hey, I was confused about what you posted. Can you clarify whether or not you actually do have cancer or not?" "Oh, no? Wonderful. So you had a scare. Fabulous. I'm glad it's not cancer." Clearly,
Sure.
It took 3 seconds and no effort to say that.
Right. But then things sort of progress and stuff like that. And then we get to their cast trip to Miami, and oh my God, Peter Thomas is such a stunt queen. I am so, like, I think we were more fans of Peter when he was on Atlanta with Cynthia, but like, he is so messy Nene was right.
Patricia.
Nene was right. Stay out of women's business. And they go to his restaurant and he's working on this project with Wendy to start a bar. and he's claiming that Wendy ghosted him, and Wendy is refuting this, and she has text messages to kind of prove it. I believe her, honestly.
Wendy is a super professional woman. I'm not questioning whether she actually showed up to meetings and communicated properly. She's a college professor. Like, she knows how to stay on top of her stuff.
Sure. But they basically decided to go to Bar 1 in Miami, which wasn't coordinated at all. And Mia is so in this for whatever reason. She keeps saying that her and Gordon are like almost like family with Peter or whatever, and like, which we find out later could be a little bit deeper. But then they get into this confrontation, and Mia brings up the stuff with Peter at the table, and they start fighting normally, and just out of nowhere, Mia throws that drink, like unprompted. Like, I feel like I like Mia. There are times where I think Mia brings a good amount to the show, but also I feel like she's constantly always looking for that housewives moment.
Oh, clearly. I feel like she went into that dinner knowing that she was going to throw that water on Wendy at some point, and she was just waiting for it to escalate to that point.
And then we won't even get into the whole dialogue of like the hypocrisy of that. And because I feel like the big discussion from that fight is like Giselle and Robin, and like, you know, whether they are unfair to Wendy, which I think they are. And, you know, the hypocrisy of it all, and trying to hold Karen accountable for it, which is ridiculous.
Like saying that Karen should have, you know, tried to tamp it down, but they were sitting there egging it on at the table and filming it for their own enjoyment, trying to say they were filming it to keep people accountable, as if there wasn't an entire camera crew there. Like,
and also to diffuse the situation, but also pick a side.
Right.
How does that, like, whatever. It's a long story, but that happens. But then this last couple episodes, we've been seeing the sort of like, you know, the lasting stuff of this thing with Mia and Jacqueline, who were like lifelong best friends. Jacqueline's family took Mia in as a foster kid. Like, they have a weird relationship, but then act as though like all the hints that they're implying about how weird their relationship is, like everyone's reading into. Which it's like, you guys are basically implying that you guys like pass around Gordon.
Yeah, I mean, it's real, pass around Jacqueline. I'm not quite sure how. I mean,
either way,
like there's some,
like Mia bought Jacqueline a car, and like it's just a lot. And then this last episode on their trip to Mexico, like they blow up on the plane apparently, and about their parenting skills and how Mia has to basically take care of Jacqueline's kids and stuff like that. And honestly, I was kind of more on Mia's side in the beginning, but then when I thought about it a little bit more, I do think it's a little frustrating of how Mia talks about being a foster kid and like sort of like, you know, needing a village to sort of survive, and then not giving that to Jacqueline's kids. I can see being a little frustrating. And then they blow up at the hotel, and Mia tells Jacqueline to close her legs to married men. Again,
never heard that line before.
Like, you can't just take Nene Leakes lines. It's just, come on. And then Jacqueline blows up on her and is really upset. This is a lot. It's really a lot and too much, in my opinion.
Oh, 1,000%. So we are going to take another quick break to give you some messages from our sponsors. But when we come back, we will be speaking about the amazing movie, Megan. Be right back.
Well, hello, friends. I'm your pal in the mainstream media.
And I'm the Riz.
And, you know, Riz, it takes years of strenuous, dedicated training before you're worthy to step inside a professional wrestling ring. But it takes even more time to develop complex, highly astute opinions about professional wrestling. Am I right?
That is correct. And you know where we can find that?
Yes.
On the Wrestling Man.
That's right.
Sidekick Media Services. We are your sidekick in business for social media, video production, and more. Find out more at sidekickmediaservices.com.
Welcome back to A Gay and His Enby. We are going to move on to speaking about this, little movie that came out this week, this past weekend, named Megan.
Movie of the year.
Honestly, I mean, it came out week into the year, but honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. It's movie of the year. This is fabulous.
We haven't been to the theater in a while, and like this pulled us out of our houses for a reason to get down and see it, because the whole marketing of it all and sort of everything leading up to it, I was really glad that it lived up to the hype.
And I was also really glad that it didn't. I mean, as much as the trailer tried to make it look like it was a traditional slasher film, it really wasn't. It wasn't really scary at all. When you go into it at the mindset of camp and comedy, I mean, it's got the tension there, but it's not horror.
I would consider it more thriller than anything.
I mean, the thrilling moments were comedy for me.
Sure.
I mean, I would say that, it's really not. To me, it is similar to, but still less scary than, a sleepaway camp.
Sure.
In its level of camp and all of that. But I still thought sleepaway camp had its scary moments and had its tension that I thought was a little bit thicker. Megan, I don't think really got to that point. I think it was just funny the whole way through.
Yeah, and I'm not a big horror buff.
No, neither am I. I'm not a huge horror fan at all.
But I think there was also more of a message behind the movie than anything that I think actually was really well said and well put. In a way where I just looked at it more as a structural movie than a specific horror genre. And the campiness of it all. So I think I talked about this with you, but the writer of the film was basically asked in an interview in the press or whatever about asking her why it's like such a resonating movie with gay people, and her giving some answer about like, well, it's about chosen family, and that's something that gay people can really resonate
it's
with.
because the doll has a resting bitch face,
and she did a TikTok dance.
And did a TikTok dance, and she follows that RBF up with the best bitchy one-liners, and she just like no sells it to the camera. There's no indication that was supposed to be funny in the film. Like, it's beautiful in like its delivery and
good on them also going back to like I'm so thankful, like thinking back on it, the fact that they didn't CGI her.
Oh yeah.
That they actually made a point to like focus on prosthetics and doing something that was actually lived, as opposed to like, because I feel like that's something that we really need to get back to in terms of film. And
the girl that played Megan did an amazing job making her movements still look animatronic.
Right.
There was still a air of this thing is not human, and for a human to actually pull off that uncanny valley is that is amazing acting, and I'm looking forward to what she does more in her career, because she's very young, so she's hopefully going to have a long career ahead of her,
and was able to balance sort of the uncanny valley-ness of it with some more like serious elements where it was also very believable. Like the points that they wanted to make stick out and be more poignant, I think, worked, and that's really commendable.
Oh, do you mean like Megan singing how many different songs in this? This was almost a Glee episode.
Honestly, at this point. What did you think about? Because I know there was a lot of discussion about like they originally were planning for it to be rated R, and that they had to basically cut down a lot of the scenes and refilm stuff to get it to a PG-13 rating and kind of cut down on some of the gore. I don't even think it necessarily needed it. I wouldn't mind seeing that version, to be honest. But
I would, because from what I have heard, most of what they took out was had to do with the dog.
Yes,
and that easily will push a movie into our territory, and I'm kind of glad they took that out and just kind of hand waved a lot of that violence, at least the violence towards the dog.
Yeah.
The violence towards the doll, however, oh my goodness. Like, talk about some bonkers banana pants effects. This was fabulous. Like, that person in a silicone mask, meaning to be a robot, clearly turned into a sock puppet.
Yes.
And it was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen on screen. And she was flopping around like she had absolutely no structure to her body. And it was so funny. I was screaming laughing at that. That was hilarious. And it wasn't supposed to be a funny moment, I don't think.
But it was great having a full theater too of people also laughing.
Yeah.
Like no one took themselves way too seriously like watching this.
I mean,
well.
there was an entire family of like 5 and 6-year-old kids in there.
Which honestly, I normally think sounds crazy when it comes to like horror movies and stuff like that. But I saw someone who was reviewing this saying that like it could be a really good intro movie for people wanting to get into horror, and I actually do think that. I think a child could probably watch this.
And the fact that they backed it down to PG-13 really made it more accessible to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas if they had left it at the gore level that it was originally shot at, it would not have been that accessible. And honestly, like you were saying, I don't think it needed it. I think everything was conveyed in the way it needed to be conveyed.
It's also it's not going to have the Chucky effect where where I don't think anyone's going to fear Megan in terms of anything deep seated. But I mean,
she's not any more scary than Regina George from Mean Girls.
No.
Like, I mean, that's honestly where most of her character I think comes from. But
do you think it gets any awards?
I hope so. It should.
I don't want to hold out hope.
But horror rarely does. Horror, like fantasy and superhero movies and stuff like that, is critically ignored when it comes to award season and whatnot. And that is awful, because some of the best effects and some of the best acting honestly happens in those movies, because to convince an audience that you have magical powers, or to convince an audience that you have, that you're a robot, believably, that is amazing acting. And that is something that you can't just do. Like, not every actor can do that. That is a niche skill, and it should be recognized.
I hope someone can make the strong enough argument and really push for that to get into an award season and really get at least some recognition, because I think it's earned it in many ways, and credit to the marketing team as well, because I think also that was a big I think there was they got like 42 million on opening weekend.
Oh yeah, it's been crazy successful.
Yeah,
and I think part of that also has been a part of continuing that and keeping that hype up. Has been, have you seen the new Megan Twitter account?
Yes,
where
it's
she
amazing.
will go and anybody that like has any negative review of the movie, she will literally go in and edit their tweet and retweet it as a positive review. It's hilarious, and it's done in a video, so it's like her like doing VO, like sad, you should have said this instead. Guess you'll learn. It's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
It's going to get sequeled. It's going to get
it better get sequeled.
It's got to be.
I will be there on opening night for the next one. It's, oh my gosh, fabulous movie.
Yeah, so definitely please go check it out. It's a real fun time.
Even if you don't like horror, please go check this out.
Honestly.
I don't like scary movies at all. This movie is not going to give you any sort of nightmare fuel. There are 2 jump scares in sort of the second act of the movie, but you see them coming a mile ahead. So if that's something that strongly affects you, you can easily avoid it if you want to. So don't let that stop you from seeing this movie. It is a amazingly evil good time. And I want to go see it again. I haven't seen enough of it yet. Hey, thanks for joining us this week on Gay and His Enby. Tune in next week for more of our recaps and hot takes. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you're listening, and check us out on our social media at A Gay His Enby on all the platforms. A special shout out to Shane Ivers, who wrote Pulsar, the song we're using for our theme. For my husband Eamon, I'm Merlin, and we're out.
This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.